Welcome to Leeds Tester Gathering. I've got a cracking lineup tonight. We have, there's some testing practice from AD, a strategy talk from Chris Warren, and some technical testing from Steve Mellor. I hope I've got all that right. Thanks to our sponsors this evening, who are Computershare and 1010 for hosting. No point hanging around, let's get straight on with Steve's. Cool. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
Evening, everybody. For those who were at my last Leeds Tester Gathering talk, I haven't had 3 beers. I've had that much of a beer, so it might be a bit more coherent this time. You can see it on YouTube. It's quite funny. I've watched it. My company Computershare is sponsoring tonight. And what I didn't realise when I managed to talk them into doing it is that you get a slot to speak, so I had to come up with something to speak about. So this is basically telling you a story from about 12 years ago when something I didn't like happened at work, and this is my reaction to it. I've become a bit of a rebel, and I got very low scores when I got graded at the end of the year, but you'll find out why. So, and it sort of changed my whole approach to testing from that day forward. I'm still at the same company, although it's owned by somebody else. So we'll see how we get on. So, the sponsors, Computershare. It's one of those big companies you've probably never heard of. They work in the financial sector. We've got 16,000 employees in 21 different countries. If you have a share scheme at work, it's called One Plan. Computershare are the people behind do that. If you ever had childcare vouchers in the UK, there's a very good chance it'll be Computershare's applications that you'll have applied it with. And they also do IPO stuff and share offerings and those sorts of things globally. They're, like I say, a very big company I'd never heard of until they bought us out. We've taken over servicing mortgages for UCAR, which makes us the largest third-party mortgage servicer in Europe, with nearly 2,000 employees in the UK. So if ever you're looking for a job, we're in Skipton and Cross Flats. Both of them are really nice buildings. You get nice views of hills and sheep and cows if you're near the auction mart. It's a really nice place. I've been there for 14 years on the 17th of this month, and I haven't regretted a day of it, apart from this story. So I don't want to tie the whole thing with this. It was a very long time ago. It was a different company called HML, and most of the people involved aren't there anymore, except for me, because I'm like a limpet once I grab on. That's why I've been married for 27 years, I suppose. So speaking of being married, this is my lovely wife, Joanne, and next to her is what we call our anniversary rose. Around the 7th of July every year, we've been in the same house for 22 years, and since we bought it, that rose has bloomed on or around our anniversary, or it's been bloomed by the time our anniversary comes around, so that's called our anniversary rose. And the reason I mention it is because tonight is Joanne's birthday. Now, she's very nicely said, because we're going to a show next week, which was the other day option, she's very nicely said that she'll go for a meal with her daughter, because my daughter lives in Leeds now and goes to Leeds University doing a master's. She's very nicely said, as long as I don't hang about and get drunk afterwards and tell lots of testing stories, she'll let me snip out for a couple of hours and do this. So if you ever see me with this lady, tell her thank you for sparing me for this evening. Okay, so a couple of shameless plugs. Some of you may know me as the big the periodic table of testing guy. I quite like it when people call me that, because it means I've been remembered for something other than swearing or drinking. I blog at thebigtesttheory.com, so you can check it out and find out what this big funny thing is. And in November, I grow a tash for men's health. Movember's a worldwide movement. It's been going for 12 years. It focuses on men's health issues. It tries to stop men dying too young, and I've been doing it for 9 years, and it's quite profound this year because someone very close to me committed suicide, and the number one killer of men under the age of 40 is suicide. So obviously we need to get better at talking about stuff, and these sort of things help. So if you can spare a couple of quid, search for Movember and AD Stokes, or if you don't find me, just anybody really. So that's my shameless plugs out of the way. Now to the story. So, from this story you will hear why I don't find bugs, even though some people think testers are paid for a living to find bugs. I don't do that, I just describe the behaviour that I see. Why I think bugs have no real intrinsic value in themselves, and how changing a conversation changed my whole approach to testing. You can tell me how to do my job, but you may get injured, and I'll probably ignore you anyway. So, once upon a time, back in 2005, it was the greatest year for English cricket because we finally retained the Ashes after about 3 decades of trying. Doctor Who was back on the TV, so I don't know if there's any other nerdy geeks who love Doctor Who out there, but actually getting rid of what had happened to it, mentioning no Sylvester McCoy names, having this guy back, Christopher Eccleston, doing it was fantastic, and we even got absolutely excellent assistants along with it and some good storylines. Chip and pin, and we've now got contactless, but chip and pin was new, and there were some regulations coming into force at the same time it was rolling out. That's how old this story is. It was also, interestingly, the 400th celebration of Guy Fawkes Night in 2005, which I didn't know until I bought a 400 repeater firework for bonfire night. Best firework display I've ever did. I lit it, it went going for 15 minutes. I actually just stood there and went, do you know I'm working my ass off for this bonfire display? It's ace, isn't it? Anyway, but also in 2005, we got a new test manager. Now, where I worked, we had testers, but didn't have a concept of test teams. We sort of floated around projects, we were given things to test, we sort of went to the developers. We were doing a sort of agile approach without really knowing what agile was and hearing what the words were and those sorts of things. It all worked quite well, everybody got along. It weren't the happiest place in the world, there were stresses and time frames and, you know, if something went wrong, why didn't the tester find it? There are all those sorts of things we associate with waterfall. But in general, the quality was okay, everything got done when it was supposed to get done. And then we got a new test manager. Now, we all hoped, being sort of left to his own devices, this new test manager, he would be the best manager ever, he would support us, he would help us along our way. Didn't quite work out sort of as we'd hoped. So one of the first things he did, he came in and interviewed all the testers, and he asked us what our specialisms were and how we approached testing, and he seemed a real amiable guy. And then he did a load of analysis, and then he decided that testers were going to be a test team, we're all going to sit together, and whatever we do, we shouldn't talk to developers, because we shouldn't waste their valuable time. His words, that is a direct quote. I got disciplined for talking to a developer. So he also came up with a load of measures and metrics, and amongst these was the brilliant idea of basically developers and testers going to war over bugs. So, as a metric which was measured at the end of the year, how many bugs a tester found decided how good they were at their job. But at the same time, how many bugs were found said how bad a developer was at their job. It was exactly the same metric used in 2 different ways on 2 sides of the fence. The instant result, when I went to see my mate and said, oh, I found a bug in this software. No, you haven't. Sorry? You haven't found a bug? I don't do bugs. Right. Well, this thing ain't working. Well, it's a feature. Sorry? So you've seen the jokes, you've heard the stories, there's also all this sort of thing got in. I've even put it on there, disciplined for talking to a developer. There was an almost instant reduction of speed and quality. Nobody would talk to anybody. You got told off if you tried to speak to people. Everybody's arms were up in the air. We had, in my opinion, a really good group of about 20 testers. Within 3 months, we had a really good group of 10 testers. Because 10 of them went, I'm off out the door. So, as a tester who finds an issue, when I find what they call bugs, I don't know if anybody watched Miranda, I just thought I'd throw that in there, then I'll talk about behaviour instead. So I won't even mention a bug. So I'll just say there's something weird happening, or I'm seeing something interesting here, can I walk you through it? Because I still talk to developers. I got 3 verbal warnings for talking to developers. Still did it. I don't know if anybody, there's quite a few people who have met them in the room, that might make a lot of sense given what you know about it. So there shouldn't be an argument, just a useful discussion. And to be fair, when I wasn't caught or told off, that's pretty much what happened. I still talked to developers, I talked to BAs, if there was, I saw something wrong in the requirements or things didn't make sense. I was having the same conversations I was having before. It's just at the end of the year, you found the least bugs out of anybody. I'm very tempted to put you on a performance improvement program and things like that. Yeah, whatever, do what you want. I'm still getting paid. So, the new reality was, so when I saw things that didn't quite stack up, so I'd go to a developer in the old days and I go, oh, I've found a bug. You've sort of told us the library opening and closing times, but it doesn't make sense. It's not actually giving me any useful information at all. Oh no, that's a feature. That's how we do it. Anyway, so the conversation come. I think we can improve those a little bit better. This is a bit weird. Do you really think the user's going to get some value out of what you're seeing there? Or if there were 2 men in a truck and happened to be 3 men in the truck, blatant advertising, messing about, then I could have a conversation about that sort of stuff. It wasn't really about the bug. It was about where's the value in what we're doing. It's where's the quality. How can we make this better? How can we show that what we're going to do at the end of the day is going to add value to the business? Now, to be honest, that's where most people were before the new test manager. Afterwards, everybody was scared for the jobs. Everybody wants to be rated good at the end of the year and be in for any pay rise. I missed out on 3 pay rises, I think it was, because I was underperforming. Like, all my stuff went out, had no live bugs in it. There were loads of other live bugs, but my stuff didn't. I thought that would have win. I don't know. Have a vote. Who thinks live bugs are bad? Right, you don't have to all put your hands up. Or you can take a picture of it. Like, look, all these people didn't put their hands up. They think live bugs are good. So that was the new reality. I had a lot of conflict behind the scenes. I had meetings with HR on occasion. But I'm, like I said, a bit of a limpet. I said, well, I know what your discipline procedure is. It's going to take you at least 2 years of effort to get rid of me. Do you really want to go to all that trouble? Or you just want to leave me alone? The HR person said, you've got a fair point. I'll have a word with your manager. Then he stopped talking to me. Do you know how easy it is to do an end-of-year review when your manager doesn't speak to you? He sends you a meeting invite, you decline it, you never mention it again. You get a thing through an email saying, you've been rated as underperforming, and I replied to it, I know. Anyway, we digress. So the realisation was, for me, over time, as an entity, bugs don't really have any intrinsic value. They're not actually, just labelling something as a bug doesn't actually do anything about the bug. It doesn't tell you everything about the bug. I've seen some massive bugzillas and all sorts of different reports and things. We had a 4-page template per bug. Now, for a spelling mistake, you had to fill a 4-page template in if there was a bug. And then they'd still argue about it and say, well, what language are you talking? Are you talking American? Are you talking English? Literally everything you could think of to argue about it was the same. They were obviously divisive, especially in our company, using it as a measure between both people. So, and they were a massive hindrance to collaboration. So, time began, having a beer one afternoon, as happens, eureka, bugs have no value, I will only describe behaviour. So I sort of reinforced in my head what I was. And the reasoning behind it is bug reports are almost always incomplete. You can't cover every piece of hardware it's going to be on. You can't cover every scenario. Even the most simplest bug, it could be, there's so many different ways to replicate it. It's easier to show people. It's easier to sit down with people and talk them through it and walk them through it and all that sort of stuff. So bug reports, to me, once it had sort of sunk in that this was stupid, I saw more stupid. So the more I read them, the more I sat down with someone who was like, I've got to finish this bug report by the end of the day. And I said, well, why? Why do you have to finish this bug report there? Just go talk to him. You can. It's for the thing you're doing, if you explain it properly, it'll probably be fixed by the end of the day. Oh no, I've got to get my bug report, I've got to get my swab, I've not found enough bugs this month. And it was, I literally went home crying for other people. I was very frustrated. It's about the closest I've ever come to walking out on a company. It infers somebody's wrong or has done something wrong. We're all human, we all error. I went in the Apple store, bought a new phone and realised I'd forgotten to work out where 1010 was. And as time was passing 6 o'clock, I'm thinking, all right, well, I'll just Google map it. And it's a new phone and it's not set up and it's not linking to anything. I couldn't get on the event, couldn't find the postcode for it. I ended up having to use a laptop And my new phone that I'd just spent loads of money on was completely useless. I had to do a laptop to Google this place, to find the address, to look on Google Maps, to realise all I had to do was go up a level and walk straight. Could have thought of that earlier. Anyway, so it infers somebody's wrong or has done something wrong. Bugs don't mean you've done something wrong. Bugs might mean you've forgotten something. Bug might mean you weren't as careful as you could be. But it doesn't mean you've done something wrong. That's the whole point of testing and quick feedback and all that sort of stuff. And yes, you can challenge me all you want on this, but these are my opinions. So in my opinion, the bugs means somebody's done something wrong. If you're describing behaviour, it's just the behaviour of the system. It doesn't infer somebody's done something wrong. They can take that away from it if they want, but I'm not putting that on them. It's a duplication of effort because your conversation or your demonstration is needed anyway. It's very, very rare you're going to take a bug report and get everything you need out of it without asking a single question. Very rare. And records of these can be used, in my opinion, wrongly by someone as a measurement. So, like how many bugs per line of code? Who gives a shit? If you refactor it, there might be half as many lines of code. So does that mean you've got twice as worse an application because you refactored it? That doesn't make sense, does it? The second part, behaviour for me, it adds value by allowing us to discuss, clarify, and sort of make some alterations as we're going along. It allows you to refactor the clause, the code. You're asking questions. You're not making it opens it up. And the other side of it is, if you're just describing the behaviour, behaviour implies it's behaviour to somebody. So instead of just thinking, I had a requirement say, it must do X. So I tested, it did X. I wasn't thinking about how it looked. I wasn't thinking about user flow. It was 12 years ago. Much better tester now. It's not a job interview, I know, but I am better now. You didn't think about accessibility things. You didn't think about what the contrast colours were, where it laid out in a field, whether it was responsive, all the different stuff that behaviour is. Having a requirement that said it must do X. X is just a thing. It's a thing that lives inside lots of other things that are going on. People are using it. Pissing people off when they're using an application isn't very good because they're either going to spend every day pissed off because they have to use it or they're going to drop it and move on to something else. Either way, it's not very good for your business. And actionable insights, which I didn't know they were called that 12 years ago, but Ash educated me. Actionable insights, you could say, it's doing this sort of weird thing. I think it'd be a little bit better if we just tweaked it so it did it this way, then these sort of people would be less affected or that would be better. So I was offering actionable insights on how to improve things, how to make things better, how to solve problems, without really knowing that's what I was doing. I was just trying to make things better, keep the quality as good as I could. So, I sort of worked out, because I was doing this talk, when I was bored one night, wife was watching Coronation Street, there was nothing interesting on Twitter to link to that I could read. I sort of started doodling on a pad, and this was sort of my behaviour decision tree. So, I started off by describing some behaviour. Now, from that, when I had a conversation, we can work out whether that behaviour is desirable or whether it's undesirable. If it's desirable, that's all well and good. But if it's undesirable, we have two decisions. We can either address and fix it straight away, or we can leave it, whether that's forever or whether it's to address later. We can come up with some sort of priority based on risks and value and what we're doing and all that sort of stuff. So at that point, you might put a story in the backlog saying there's something to tweak. Not necessarily a bug. Our developers in the team that I like, they like things that I found to go in as bugs because they know it winds me up. Probably because I'm doing this talk and these are the things I talk about at work. But they just line me up. Anyway, whether we decide to address and fix it straight away, whether we leave it forever or address it, whether it's desirable, everybody gets to say to me, shut up, Eddie. Let's move on. So that's the decision tree. So, in conclusion, once I stopped looking for bugs, a few interesting things sort of happened to me that I've sort of touched on. So, the behaviour didn't make it necessarily just about the requirements. It made it about the users. It made it about what are the risks in this, what are the risks that it's causing by doing this? What are the risks that could happen by it not doing something? It's, again, not about anybody being wrong. Users, to me, are a lot more important than requirements. I've always sort of fed back things, even before this, it was, people are going to get pissed off. They're having to do 3 clicks here, where if we change that button, they'd only have to do 1. And that's it. It's going to save a bit of time. It's going to make the flow easier. It's going to not knock them off as much. I've always sort of been that sort of person who thinks this could be slightly improved. But just describing the behaviour rather than the bug, it made it a lot clearer to me. It was a lot about, well, who's the poor schmuck who's going to get stuck with this crap? And I don't want to be that poor schmuck who gets stuck with crap. I mean, we've all used apps and gone, what the hell are they trying to do to me, and why have they done it so stupidly? And probably because they're recording bugs. I don't know. Could be. There could be a causality. How many bugs they record and how crap it is. So, if we're talking about risk, it includes everything from usability, testability, accessibility, all the abilities. Behaviour has impacts which should make the software useless to some. I had an argument about not a bug, about some behaviour, and because the person I was arguing with had the heels so dug in, it didn't matter whether I talked about behaviour or the heard was bug. And I spent ages just trying to say, look, I'm not going to record this if it gets sorted. So all I want is it sorted. And it took me literally weeks and weeks and weeks to get the trust of this person to actually take my feedback and talk to me. He was quite happy to throw it over the fence, ignore it once he'd finished with it. And it took me weeks, and he became one of my best contacts in the development department, because once I built that trust up, it was there. And I could go up to him and say, I found 5 bugs on your code, you crap. And he goes, no, you bloody haven't. I said, no, but I can describe some weird behaviour to you. Anyway, so it's like building up. I couldn't talk about bugs in the beginning, but we could laugh and joke about it in the end. So that's sort of my little story, really. It's not about bugs. It's about the behaviour. And let's not make people wrong for doing the job. Let's try and make everybody do the job better. Let's collaborate, not agitate. I think I heard somebody say a long time ago. So that's very quickly. It's a very short talk, so I might be able to get away back to my wife. So that's a very short talk. Any questions?
Heidi, how long did your manager last?
I don't exactly. I think it was somewhere around 3 years, 2 months, 4 weeks, and 3 days.
I think I was still there when you left. Where is he now?
Don't know, don't care, don't want to know.
Well, no, just to protect the innocent.
There'll be no names. There'll be no names. If you know the company, you can do the math, I think, and work it out. But I'm not putting anybody's names to this. It's about, I'm only describing behaviour. I don't think he had a bug. I think he had a behavioural issue. I think he was trying to solve problems that didn't exist by putting in metrics and measures and teams that built him an empire. I think there was a bit of empire building going on. But as far as I know, I think I heard he'd retired.
We're safe.
I think you might be safe. I think if you see this, you should stand on your desk and shout it really loud that it's bad. Yes?
Does everyone at Computershare adhere to your way of thinking?
Oh no.
No, just you.
Well, no. Most people who bump into me and I've had a long conversation with about how recording bugs is a waste of time, start recording less bugs. At the end of the day, that we have different development pods, and all the pods are working agile and they're self-organising teams. So if the teams are happy to have bugs recorded, nobody uses them as measures. All that's sort of gone out the window. To me, they're just another story in the backlog of something that needs doing to make it the thing better. If they want to record it under a bug heading, so be it. We get bugs in mine. They're very rare. I quite often, as soon as I see something weird, I'll do some investigation, make sure it's replicable, make sure I understand what's going on, see if there's any knock-on effects and things like that. And then I'll roll my chair across the person I know that's been working on that bit of code and say, or I'll ask them when they've got time, and I'll roll my chair up and I'll go, can I walk you through something that's a bit weird? I don't think this thing's doing it quite the way you intended, or just that sort of language. It's just non-confrontational, not making them wrong or anything. And quite often I hear back, oh, well, that's a bug. And to find, if it's a bug to them, it's a bug to them. I'm not going to tell them I don't think it's a bug.
What about if it's complex, and what about if they don't have, what if they don't have time at the time, and then you've got to remember it? I'm not yet convinced.
I'll document stuff for myself.
Right, but then you've documented it for yourself.
Yeah, to remind me when I have the conversation. I'm not documenting every different thing. It's just enough to remind me what it is. It might be, sometimes it's a screenshot, sometimes it's a couple of paragraphs. It's just enough. Sometimes it's scribble notes on a pad. It doesn't, like I said, I don't want to document stuff that's getting thrown away when it's just going to be a conversation. The devs are quite used to me now. If I'm bugging them over something straight away, it's something that can be fixed very quickly. And they're usually quite happy to say, "Oh, give me 20 minutes, 30 minutes to finish this bit I'm doing, and then come and I'll give you a shout." I think the longest I've ever had to wait to have a conversation is a couple of days. And we have 2-week sprints. And usually on the last couple of days of the sprints, I'll have a conversation saying, I've found something weird that's going to affect the demo. Do you want to address it now? Or can we put this to one side and we'll pick it up straight after the planning meeting? So that's, like I said, we're self-organising team. I've trained them now. They're quite used to me. They're quite used to my morning stand-ups going, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to be exploring in this area." So I hope it's nice and neat and tidy.
Do you think they work around you now?
No, they all know why.
Well, you wouldn't know, would you?
I think I would, because the stuff I'm finding won't get fixed.
So even if they were and you found something, so what would you do then?
Well, like I said, we'll have a conversation about it. It may well be that we decide that it's not enough impact to do anything about it now. So we'll get the product owner's input and let him decide where it stands as a priority. Whether, like I said, we've decided it's desirable after all and we're happy with it, or whether we put it on a backlog and it sits there until we move back in that area or whatever it might be. There's no single answer of just because I see something and describe it, it gets fixed straight away. There's a lot of stuff that does, but there's a lot of stuff that we get other people's input in. It might be something where I go, I've thought of a new scenario. Have we analysed this to this point where we'll understand what will happen in that scenario? And it might be a case of, at the moment, we've got a BA on the team who's working quite closely with the business. And we've literally, where I'm sat, we've got the business SME sat on the other side of the table. So it might be I'll be talking to a dev and we'll think about something and we'll give Tamsin a shout and go, "Oh, if we did this, has anybody talked to you about this sort of scenario, that sort of scenario?" And it's like, "Oh, well, to be honest, I'm not sure that came up. Could it?" And it's like, well, you're like getting them to explore their area then. And because we work, like I say, work closely with the business SMEs a lot of the time, and we now have, we used to do all the zone analysis, but we've now got a BA on the team. So that sort of frees me up a bit because I ended up doing a lot of the analysis. So we've now got a BA on the team who's dedicated to 2 teams doing all the upfront analysis and providing us with a bit more background on the stories that we're working on. But yeah, if they wanted to work around there, I think they'd be scared if I caught them.
So the culture of fear is back.
Yeah, I'm only joking. No, to be honest, if they wanted to work around me, that's entirely up to them. As if we're seeing decent quality going out when we publish stuff, does it matter? No. We'd have to ask them. In fact, I will tomorrow. And stand up, I got asked a really good question. Because I bug you about describing behaviour all the time. Do you work around me?
Tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah. And then they'll tell me, of course we do, Eddie. Because that's what you want to hear.
What do you mean by working around? Because wouldn't that mean that maybe they're thinking about quality more or whatever? Like, how do you mean working around?
So working on a different part of the system. No. But maybe not giving the full story of changes that have been made. Maybe not.
Yeah, it could be, but we've got a visual Kanban board in TFS, and we know what stories people are working on by the tasks that are put in there. So I can see, and plus I got sight of Team City, so I can see every committer code that goes in. So there's a description of the area and the stuff that it goes in. So I can see what's going in. So if I see 2 or 3 commits in a certain area, I might say to one of the guys, "Oh, I want to explore this functionality. I've seen you've been working on it. Is it ready for me to have a look at now, or would you rather me leave it for a bit while you do a bit more?" And then, so I'm asking them, basically, do you think it's ready for me to explore? Or tell me you can explore, but if you see this sort of behaviour, I'm still got that to add. So, like I say, there's conversations going on all the time about different works, but I just don't talk about bugs or make anybody wrong.
I don't know, sometimes with like behaviours, it sounds quite neutral, and obviously that has its benefits.
Yeah.
But sometimes, to me, testers are great. Bug
I find lots of problems. I don't call them issues or bugs or defects. In fact, sometimes I'll say I think we've got a problem. That doesn't necessarily mean it's their problem or they've caused it.
Like I said, the terminology of is there a problem here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like I say, I describe the behaviour. We have a discussion about whether it's desirable or undesirable, and that could be in a lot of different contexts. It could be in the context of the original requirement, it could be in the context of business value, it could be in the context of risk. There's all sorts, like I said, there's all sorts of things going on there. My guys are really good at sort of designing accessibility in, because I did a web project a couple of years ago and I was asked to look into accessibility. So I did an hour's presentation on accessibility with all the information that I'd found and talked about universal inclusive design and stuff like that, and they took a load of stuff away from that, did their own research. So then a lot of the sort of obvious accessibility bugs that you get, they just don't exist in our software. We have automated tests for pretty much every screen that you can tab to at every field without getting trapped. There's a lot of automated tests you can't do with accessibility, but I've got like Wave and I use DevTools and I do all sorts of different things just to keep an eye on accessibility as I'm going through. Any more? Any more?
Thank you very much.
Oh.
Go on.
Slow roll.
I find it much more happier and more collaborative once you change the way of thinking and the way of working.
Well, the devs who I wasn't raising bugs against, who were getting good grades at the end of the year, they thought I was wonderful. So I was taking all the heat for them because I was getting underperforming. I was getting underperforming for 2 or 3 years in a row, and they were all getting, oh, you hardly ever have a bug against you, no? Because I wasn't raising them. Sorry.
Yeah, I quite get the positivity concept of it, and then I can appreciate whatever is so far. But I feel like there should be some currency where you should qualify your project isn't it like the code that got delivered. There should be some currency where you should say it's good or bad. So I don't know how you project that using this concept. Bug doesn't need to be a currency though, but I'm just trying to understand how you say if you want to tell to someone higher up in the ladder with this approach, if you want to tell them how good or bad is your sprint going on or is the quality of the product, how do you quantify it?
Well, we report to the product owner, and the product owner sits opposite desk there to me. So the product owner can hear the conversations we're having as we go through. If we have a problem where we can do things one of 2 different ways, we'll get his input and say which would you prefer, or have you got any leanings? Is there any knowledge you've got that might make us lean one way or the other? We have mid-sprint reviews as well as end of sprint demos. At the end of sprint demo, we show them everything we've done. If they don't think that's good enough, or if there's not quality, on occasion they've gone, actually you've solved the problem, it works, but I'm not quite comfortable with the UI. I think we can clean it up, or I think we can make it an easier flow, or whatever it might be, and then we'll just put we'll put a story in to refactor the flow, or whatever it might, you know. So in terms of is what we're delivering good or bad, it's if the product owner goes fine or not, then it can go both ways, but hopefully it's more fine than not.
So do you not use the terms pass and fail then? If you don't use the term bugs?
I don't use pass and fail. I pull through into system tests. If they say to me, are we all right to put it through into UAT, we'll have a discussion and go yes or no. So it's a team. It's a team.
The inevitable question comes.
It's a team decision.
What do you think? What do you say?
They'll already know my opinion, because they'll already know my opinion because we'll be discussing it at every stand-up, and towards the end of the build they go, are we getting near, do we think it's fit for purpose and stuff like that. The whole team's responsible for quality. From every commit there's automated tests in a continuous integration sort of environment, so all those sort of checks and balances are done as we're going along. I'm just there to think about the human element as much as and explore and just qualify, I suppose.
Brilliant. Thank you. Everybody, very good. Thanks, Chris.
You are welcome. How's that? So yeah, so I put some slides together. I think I'm an okay tester. I am terrible at drawing, so I apologise in advance. But so I recently attended the Leeds Testing Atelier, and yeah, well done, shout out for that. And I attended a panel talk about the tested pyramid, and the people there, and they had lots of different ideas. So look at that terrible drawing. So one guy drew his...
It's way better than that.
Yeah, no, one guy drew his pyramid upside down. What's all that about?
That wasn't the guy, that was...
Oh, was that yours?
Oh, well, it's...
But you weren't on the panel.
Yeah, it's ours. He's my...
Okay, so somebody who is, you know, could be a man or a woman, drew their pyramid upside down. Somebody did a traditional pyramid, you know, with the unit test and the integration test and the UI test on top. One guy talked about how he liked to have a thin layer of integration tests at the bottom and then some unit and integration and UI tests, which was interesting because he seemed to think that the pyramid more talked about order of the way he runs his test. He talked about how he liked to run these integration tests first, not necessarily how many of tests he had in that section. And then a lady on the panel had her end-to-end testing in the middle because she came up with an idea that because her system was heavily front-end driven and there wasn't many integration points and it was all about input and output and all that sort of thing, that they needed a lot more end-to-end UI type tests rather than integration tests. So that was her thinking, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to say that she's wrong, but well, I'm trying to not be controversial. So it got me thinking. There's all these different ideas. There's all these different ways to draw them and different orders to put them in. Some people like to say this is the order that we run them in. Some people like to say that this is how many tests we have and things like that. But what is this test pyramid, and why do we use it, and what's it for? And is it that it tells us how many tests we need in certain areas? Is it that it tells us what order we should run our tests in? Or are we allowed to put our own pyramids together? Are we allowed to say, well, actually, I want my end-to-end test to go in the middle, or actually, I want to run some integration tests up front? You know, are we allowed to do that, or is it a very strict pyramid like that you'll find if you Google it, and we have to stick to that? Is that what it is? And I came to the conclusion that it doesn't matter, and I couldn't care less, and that anything that restricts me and the way I want to do things is bad, and if I think a pyramid is doing that, then I'm just going to throw it out the window. Yeah, so I came up with the idea of, well, in which case then what should I do? If I'm not going to bother with a pyramid as such, then what should I do? And I came up with an idea that what I should try and do is test everything exactly how I think it needs to be tested, and test it at whatever layer I think it needs to be tested at. And if I think that a unit test is good for it, then we can write a unit test for it. If I'm adamant that I need 10 end-to-end tests, well, then I'm going to do 10 end-to-end tests. And yeah, sod the pyramid. But at the end of the day, what I want to do is challenge myself to push everything I can as far down the stack as I can, and then start to so what this leads to is questioning myself as to, well, do I need to write that end-to-end test? Because if I've got this end-to-end test and it's going to fail, I've also got half a dozen unit tests underneath that are also going to fail. So I'm already going to be alerted that I've got an issue in this area. So do I need to spend time writing this end-to-end test? It's going to take time to write. They're notoriously more brittle. I'm going to have to maintain it if things change on the screen and all that sort of stuff. So I think the idea is, no, I'm going to try and push things as far down my stack as I can. And have I got anything else that I need to say? No. So what this then leads to, once you've done this, if you do it how I would imagine you would do it, so I'm not going to use the word correctly, but if you do this correctly, you're going to end up with a test pyramid. I mean, you know, if you write, you know, in theory you should be able to test it, a lot of stuff at a unit layer, and you can test your integration points at your integration layer, and then in the end you're left with a few end-to-end tests that you want to put at the top, and you end up with a pyramid. So you can use your pyramid, if you like, instead of a target at the start of it to say I must write more unit tests than end-to-end tests, and I must write more integration tests, and I must have as few end-to-end tests as I can. You can sort of look at your coverage, and you can say, well, you know, how's it look? And if you've got lots of unit tests and some integration tests and a few end-to-end tests, then I would say you're pretty much on track. There may well be people out there that have got specific reasons why they think that they should do things like that, and that's entirely up to them. I'm not saying they're wrong, but yeah, you are, yeah. So yeah, so you can end up like that. Now, I'm guessing that what you're going to think now is, he says that it's not a target and that we shouldn't actually like aim to do it, but then if you do it, you end up with it anyway. So is he not saying that it's actually our target from the start? And I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that if you've got 10 unit tests and 3 integration tests and 1 end-to-end test, you will have a pretty little pyramid. And that doesn't mean that you've done it right. That doesn't mean that you've pushed everything as far down as you can, and you should challenge yourself at this point and say, well, I've got this end-to-end test, like, but why? Why have I got it? Like, what does it do? What does it test? And in my personal experience, the more I look at our end-to-end test, the more I say, but when that fails, this fails, and I already know that there's a problem there. So why am I even bothering? It takes ages to run anyway. So, and I'm testing 10 other things to get to that point that are already covered at unit level as well. So I'm starting to get to the point where I don't really think that I need that many of them all. And the question that I'm now faced with is unit test coverage, failure, is unit test failure enough? Like, if that's going to alert you, then is that enough? And I personally think it is. And I think the problem that I face with it in organisations is that, and you may experience this as well, I've experienced it in a few places, that everybody has tests that always fail, and people just go, that always fails. We don't worry about that one. We can go live with that one failing. And I think that's the real problem, and that's what needs to stop. We need to sort of say, no, we have a zero tolerance approach to this. We have however many unit tests you have. Let's say you have 100, and if one of them fails, then we stop and we fix the unit test. And if we have courage and confidence in our unit testing, then there's really no need to say, well, I need a UI test, I need an end-to-end test, otherwise I don't have a pretty little pyramid. And that was pretty much all I wanted to say. Because it's a lightning talk, I won't be taking questions. I'm only joking. Does anyone have any questions?
Pizza's not here, we need to fill the time.
Who's first?
Aren't they just triangles, not pyramids?
Well, I said I'm terrible at drawing. I could have drawn a 3D pyramid, but I couldn't. That's the problem. I can't draw 3D pyramids.
So you talk about unit tests, but you're not talking about integration in that.
It's because I really don't know a lot about it. But go on.
But like, API tests are important, I think.
Of course.
Yeah, so that's my kind of version of integration, although it goes fucking mental when you look into it too much. So we don't need to do UI tests that much. I think they're fucking useless because they take too long. But API tests are really important because that's where the actual logic is. And you see the like pictures of like doors. What's the door handle one? I can't remember. But yeah, where like things seem to work in a unit level, but integration it's like fucking obvious.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's the point is you sort of say, well, I've pushed this down to a unit layer, and am I happy? And well, actually no, because this unit test doesn't actually give me the confidence that such an error message will appear if that's so. So a live example that I was looking at today, we were checking that a previous address couldn't be the same as the current address, and we had all these unit tests about, if you put in white spaces and capital letters and things like that, that it would flag up that these in fact were the same, and that it should throw this this flag to say that they were the same, but it didn't actually cover what happened when that flag was raised. So then we needed to go another step up to say, well, what happens when this flag is raised? And then we could see, yes, when that flag is raised, we get this error that says your previous address can't be the same as your current address, and we were happy then that we'd got it. So we did need to take the scale, but that was so the pyramid did sort of form naturally without thinking, without trying to do it. I ended up with 8 unit tests and a couple of integration tests.
Thank you very much. Can I just call it there? Because we've got another great talk to come, and the pizzas are
All right, pizza.
a bit behind.
Okay, hi everyone. So, that come through okay? Yeah, hi. So I'm Steve Mellor, senior software test engineer. A little bit of background about me. I've been in the IT industry about 21 years, started off as a customer support operative, and then I moved into software testing in the same group, working on the same software, but testing it as opposed to helping customers test it. So this is really my sort of journey jumping in to Webdriver, having used several test automation tools. So my background was originally manual testing, and then I got a copy of Windrunner around 2005-ish. The idea was we were going to implement a smoke test on the software we were building. So I don't know if anyone's used Windrunner before. It's actually, it wasn't a bad tool at the time. It was quite hard to implement the smoke test, but we did actually manage to build a functioning smoke test, which aided our delivery process. And then when HP bought Mercury, they killed Windrunner. I had to port all my tests to UFT, and then a few years later on, still working with the same company with the same product, the company decided that they were no longer going to fund the 5,000 odd quid a year license per seat. So we had to look elsewhere. So this is really me jumping in sort of with a sort of a problem to solve, which was get my tests into a different framework, well, write a framework from scratch with an open source tool instead of a properly supported vendor supplied product, which was actually pretty good. On reflection, having thought about it over the years, UFT wasn't that bad, certainly compared to the state that Selenium was at the time. So I guess everyone will probably be familiar with this if you've ever used Selenium. So this is just using using one of the inspector tools, the developer tools, just to find a web element so you can write some code. So coming from a UFT background, this would have just been a point-and-click operation for me. UFT drove the browser. You would click, you recorded behaviour, it would generate a pretty awful script, and then you would have to go in and clean the code up to make it reusable, make it actually functional. So my first foray into Selenium was I wanted to drive simple input boxes and stuff. I'm using Google here as an example. Here, this one's actually pretty straightforward. It's actually the example that they give you in Selenium HQ's doc. The element you would be using is name equals Q, and then the code that you would probably end up with is something along those kind of lines. So get the element by the name Q, and then send some keys to it. So that's pretty straightforward. So off I went, trying to implement my tests again for the third time. A slightly more complicated example. So this is on Amazon's website. It probably isn't meant to be interacted with too much. Now, on the face of it, normally you go for link test, name or ID. This element has neither, doesn't have any of those. It does have a few other tags though. Anyone care to hazard a guess as to what you'd probably go for? Yeah, so there's an ID there, there's alt tag. So the inspector actually rather helpfully offers you this as a possible selector. No kidding. There is actually a better choice. It's this. So you can actually do it by the alt tag. Although the syntax is a little bit complicated. You do it via the CSS selector. You've got to get your square brackets in the right place and your single quotes in the right place. Otherwise, it won't work. So this was the kind of thing I was really struggling with. Coming from the really rapidly develop your test and then polish it to really slowly develop my test and then polish it again. So it got me thinking, there's got to be a better way of doing this. So the process, as I was sort of trying to execute, was find the element in the inspector, find the unique attribute, find the right locator to actually use that attribute, test the code, and then obviously it never worked first time because it was in a frame or there was a duplicate element. So when you did find, it found the wrong one, clicked the wrong one. I thought, well, okay, there's got to be a better way. Is there any way I can get some of the information out of the browser to give me a hand with this? There's actually a rather helpful example, also in the Selenium HQ doc. This is a way of fetching back all the elements in a form. So it's not exactly the best example, to be honest. I probably could have cleaned that up a little. You get the idea, though. You ask the DOM to return you all the elements in form 0 of the DOM object. Then you iterate through all of the elements and just spit out the type, the name, and the ID. So using the Google example, it would return that. So I could write little bits of test code to go onto a page, give me a list of elements, and then play around with those, you know, so lots of windows open, all that kind of stuff. So that was great. However, one of the problems I had with the app I was testing was there was quite a lot of duplicate names in use. It was very hard to find a good selector that would return only the right element. You know, it was partly because it was a really terrible application that I was actually trying to automate. We'd moved on by then to a web-based app which was written by an external team. There was no requirement at the time of development to make it testable, so all of the IDs were non-human readable, and well, where there were IDs, it also failed to pass any accessibility tests. It had very sparse amounts of you know, usable human readable selectors. So I had to start getting a little bit creative with finding elements. So this is a little sample bit of code just to illustrate a point of if I was trying to find something by name, I may get multiple hits. Now you wouldn't know that if you're doing find element by name. It'll just give you the first one. There may be two, there may be three. That might not necessarily be the one you want to click on. So if you do find elements by name, you'll get a collection back if there's more than one. So this would tell me if the element was unique, because I would get just I would get an array list of 1. So as long as the array list equaled 1 and the element contained my element, because obviously I know I've already got the element elsewhere in the code, I can then prove that it's unique. So that selector will then definitely hit the element I care about. So I went around in circles, playing around with little bits of test code. Really, this was me learning how to use Selenium, really getting right in there into the nuts and bolts, learning about how the DOM works and how these things were you know, joined together, all the attributes that you could address a element by. And I developed a little cheat sheet. This is my little cheat sheet for things that you can actually talk to elements with. And this is actually probably in order of most likely to work, down to getting quite scary and sketchy down the bottom, where you're addressing things by a whole class or just a type, like it's an input. There might be quite a few inputs. Okay, so I've got quite a lot of test code kicking around at the time, and I thought, well, can I bring this all together into something useful? So what do I want? I want to be able to find all the usable elements on a page, extract some relevant useful attributes out of each of those elements, put them in a list. It's no good being in a terminal. Maybe I'd like to see where they are actually on a web page. And I guess it'd be nice to interact with those, prod them a little bit, and then generate some code to actually produce a test that actually works. And I accidentally wrote a test tool. So it is actually functional right as of now. This is an example of me driving the Amazon website. So there's a little bit of generated code. It generates JUnit code. It also generates just Java statements as well. So there's a full list of all the elements in the page over on the left-hand side. I have, at this point, this is a screen grab of me having done something to it. So at the point, I then interacted with the all-new Amazon Echo image and just clicked on it to find it. And the code generated me that statement to send a click to it. Okay, so I can do a demo just to prove it's not smoke and mirrors. Oops. So this is a little bit put together at the last minute. Hopefully this will work. So I've got my little app here. So I work for Sky Betting and Gaming, so we'll go onto their website. I'm not actually going to log in though. Why? It's a bit of a challenge, isn't it?
There's challenges and then there's
No, it's got a frame set. Okay, so it's just opened up the page in the browser. So anyone getting flashbacks? Okay. So it takes a little while. I think I could actually improve this. There's no indication of when it's actually finished interacting with the page. You'll notice that the slider bar there is just creeping up the screen a little bit. I think we might be finished. Okay, we're writing this out in JUnit test, so you can see there's a little bit of boilerplate code here already, just to get started. We can open up. It opens up the driver for me here, and then it gets the page. So it's ready now to start writing some statements. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the first part of actually trying to log in. So let me just find my login button here somewhere. I'll just show you this. So if you just look over here, that's the login element I want to press. If I click this, it just pops a little highlight around it. Just that again, just to let you know that that is actually the one you are looking at. So I'm just going to right click on that, say I want to click login. So it sends a click to the page, and now the page has changed. It's also written the code out here. That's my first little statement that it's written to click login. So now I'm going to have to refresh this. Sometimes it refreshes automatically if it detects a stale element reference there. So this should now find the login frame. This is another problem I ran into, is when is something in a frame, when is it not in a frame? This solves that problem by actually exploding out all the frames. So I'll show you how that looks.
Telling people not to use frames.
Well, ideally, I wouldn't have to test things with frames, but you know, you don't always get what you want. Okay, so these elements here are on the page, location page. The elements in the square brackets 1, that is just the first frame set on the page. So I'm going to have to find my login page, and that's in a form. So I click there, just so that again that just highlights the entire form. That tells me that I've got this username element here. Now I shall just click that. Just send that something. I'm not going to log in really, because it's being videoed, and that will be bad. Okay, and now I'm just going to type in a PIN number as well.
Hey, plain text.
Well, it's visible. Okay, well, it's not a real account. So if I now refresh the view, this actually shows you something interesting about Selenium you probably didn't know. So you think that asterisked out pins are nice and safe. Hopefully, it's just when this just catches up with our page. The curse of the live demo.
I've never seen the Chrome as being controlled by automated.
Yeah, it's just driving it, but from a desktop application.
Yeah,
Oh, that's new. Yeah, it's so that someone can't drop a virus on your laptop.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's quite. I think Safari does it, and I think Firefox may now as well. Okay, so now you can interrogate the password field element. You can see that it's just extracted 1111 straight out. So I can actually set an assertion on that, just to assert that value is actually there. And there we go. I've written out a little assertion. Okay, so that's only half of it. I shall now copy this, and I shall try and put that into a working IDE. So I'll get rid of that. Here's a script I prepared earlier. So I've already created a little Java project here just so I can dump this directly in. It's got the dependencies already set in the Maven file. So if I just dump this code in here, and make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so obviously you would clean this up. There's 3 tests there. Really, there's one setup step and 1 test. So you can refactor that at your leisure. And if I just run
Aren't you scared
test.
that Psychos won't refactor it? I mean, I can just see some terrible tests
hang on.
getting written.
Yeah, well, I guess that's
That's
the problem with any record and playback tool, I guess, isn't it? Is that someone thinks, okay, I've recorded it, now my job is done.
Yeah.
And here we go. Hopefully we'll see a browser. Shazam. There we go. Click on there. Oh, and it exited. Sorry. I left the driver quitting. But there you go. You get the idea. So yeah. So so far a working albeit rudimentary test recording tool. Not as good as Selenium IDE. Probably a little bit better. So next steps for me, I guess. I'll just get to my.
Are you going to become the maintainer of Selenium IDE?
No, there's actually a. There's actually they've canned it. There's a company called Ranorex are now working with the Selenium maintainers. This was at the conference. There's a company working with Ranorex, the maintainers, to produce something new. And the spin there is that they're producing a free tool. It's not open source. It's just free. And then they're going to sell some services on top if you buy the better version. So yeah,
So I think you should totally do it.
well, perhaps, yeah.
You can be the rebel in that.
Well, this is the pitch. So, future development, additional language support. You saw it was writing out Java statements. There's no reason why it couldn't spit out JS, Python, or C#. It just wants that code implementing. Code editing and code execution inside that frame. Rather than that being a read-only text window, that could be something you could actually interact with, type some statements in, execute the code straight out of that window. Whether that would work or not, I don't know. It might seem a bit weird. Page object generation. I did think about refactoring the entire bit of code to just create boilerplate code. Basically, list all the elements, which ones you want page objects for. Tick, tick, tick. Press button. Code written. Instead of spending 3 or 4 minutes per element writing your page objects, just do it automatically. Chaining find methods. Finding things is still difficult. It tries to find the best method. Maybe chaining, when it gets really difficult, then you can find it nearly, but then you need to find a group of elements by one method, and then within that group of elements find another, use another by method to further that down until you just get your one element you actually care about. And additional element support, maybe asserting on things like paragraphs, and then looking at the inner HTML to see if a blob of text is supposed to be there, or perhaps even display all the cookies in a page. So please check it out and have a look, and I am accepting pull requests.
That's really good. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've got time for a few questions at this stage. Chris?
So since you've had the experience of using both like a supported license tool and then you've had to rewrite your tests using an open source tool, now that you've done that, do you think there's any benefit in paying the $5,000 and having the license with the support? Do you think the time that you've had to spend using the open source stuff actually better spent just on the license fee? Or not?
Probably if you were thinking about the amount of money that the company spent, for me to re-implement the entire test suite, probably not. No. But I think the thing is that those tools are probably going the way of the dinosaur. Anyway, I don't think that there's much life left in UFT, and they've actually implemented something called True Client, which is some kind of Selenium-backed thing that's built into their software. I'm so it's so long since I've used it. I've got no idea what that looks like. I'm just a fully paid up member of the Selenium fan club now. The thing is, it's got buy-in from the W3C, so all the drivers now support the Webdriver wire protocol. So Selenium is the only one that implements it. So it's probably the only game in town anyway. I suspect that HP and anyone else who's still making test tools will end up just driving browsers with that wire protocol anyway. So why not just use a free implementation?
You kind of win as well because you've upskilled so much by doing this. So I don't know, you should probably convince your companies to use open source versions so you can upskill. Does it help?
Yeah, it means it's more maintainable. If HP had gone bust while we were still heavily invested, we would have had to do this anyway. So if your tool vendor goes goes kaput and you haven't got any sort of escrow or any way of getting at their source code and building something half decent, browsers change over time. Your tests are going to die. So really, you should be using open source tools anywhere where possible.
So you've got tools like Nightwatch, JavaScript, which has like very specific support for page object models. So if you wanted to build something in like that you could, because basically Nightwatch is built to drive you towards that kind of model. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, and they've simplified like the page object sort of modeling quite significantly. So it might be one to look at.
Yeah. I have played around a little bit with Nightwatch, but the project that we were working on, we ended up choosing Selenium, so we ended up going down the route. But I was already fairly sort of okay with developing stuff in Selenium. So, but yeah. Well, I guess that's another vendor. So they build their stuff on top of the Selenium implementation. Yeah, there's a big market, I guess. There are people who sell products built on top of Selenium. That's fair. It's a big space. As an open source tool, it's only me and ideally get some recruits today. But you know, the big companies have lots of money to throw it in, and they get VC funding. They build they build something big on top of Selenium. But then people are making lots of money off Apache anyway. Why not? Free for some people, not free for others.
You just used a word. Now, there's three possibilities. Either I misheard it, or it's in common usage and I've missed out, or you just made it up, and that was automagically.
I just made that up.
Did you say automatically?
Yeah, I said automagically. I say that a bit, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Well,
Yeah.
Deserve applause just for that word.
I think it's really important that you can't play back from that tool ever, because that's so the way that your tool is at the moment. So people could misuse it, but they need to put effort into misusing it because they need to have an IDE and they need to slightly understand how stuff works.
Yeah.
If you have a playback mechanism in your tool, it will become another Selenium IDE. It will become another piece of shit that is like, you know.
Well, no, I agree. Yeah, yeah.
And so what you've done there is actually quite clever by not allowing playback within the tool.
Okay. Yeah, I did think maybe I should implement that when I thought.
No.
Yeah, because then you'd have two browsers open, it'd look weird, you couldn't jump in. If there was a way of intercepting the session you already had open, playing part of the code back and then starting to re-interact with it, but you can't do that because it's two separate processors talking to the browser, and I don't think there's any way you can jump into that channel of communication.
I think it's too dangerous.
So, yeah. But I absolutely agree. You know, just recording and playing back and thinking I've done it isn't test automation.
No.
So Steve, is there a web link or something?
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. So it's up on GitHub. It's proper open source, as in you can build it from source and it compiles. So yeah, please have a look.
Can you just say that again?
Yeah. Well, I've found that before. You look at an open source tool, there's a binary, you think, well, I want to build it, but it doesn't build. That's not open source.
Any more questions? No? Right, Steve, thank you very
Okay,
much.
cheers, thank you.